Justine, it's great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here. Before we get into the big topics, I'd love to start with you. So can you tell us a little about your path, how you got here and what's shaped you along the way? And as an extension of that, you've obviously built your career in sectors that are highly regulated and deeply connected to public trust. Can you also share how that experience has influenced how you think about leading a legal team as well?
Yeah, first of all, it's really nice to be with you, Michelle, and thank you very much for the opportunity. So gosh, a bit about me, how to sort of capture it. I feel like I'm quite long in the tooth now and have quite a lot of years under my belt. So I joined as a trainee at Freshfields. So I went to university in Dublin, came over here in the early 90s, joined Freshfields, stayed there for a number of years and qualified into their specialist competition law team and worked in Brussels and worked in the UK as well. And that I think was quite formative for me because it gave me a strong interest in the business side. So competition law, doing deals, all of those sort of things, behavioural issues, looking at behavioural economics and stuff like that. It gives you much more of a sense of how a business runs necessarily than maybe all of the legal issues. So it's quite an interest. I looked at lots of different sectors. Anyway, long story short, ended up going to telecom, BT, O2, Vodafone, and learned a huge amount along the way about how businesses are run. And I took on different opportunities as I grew through those roles, including things like corporate affairs, security, compliance, risk, all of those kind of things, regulation. And then after a good few years building up, kind of moving from a specialist to more generalist roles and having the terror of having a tiny, brilliant team of lawyers doing expert things that I knew exactly what they were doing, to suddenly going, right, now you've got responsibility and accountability for people doing all kinds of technical areas of the law that I had no idea what they were doing. That was quite a formative experience, that balance of how do you stay in control, but not necessarily try to second guess the brilliant people you have in your team. It's always a delicate balance. Anyway, I then moved into energy in 2013 because I thought if I stay doing telecoms forever, I will be doing telecoms forever. And as much as I loved it, I thought, actually, I kind of need to demonstrate to myself and to the world that I can be adaptable. And energy and telecoms have quite a lot in common, to your point earlier, in that they are heavily regulated. They are sort of, they're utilities in the broadest sense. They're incredibly important. They can get taken for granted, but without them, the world as we know it sort of doesn't work. And so they have a real strong sort of public service part of their rationale for being. And I moved into energy, and I've now moved twice within the energy sector. And I'm currently the Chief Legal Officer at National Grid. And National Grid, for people who don't really understand it, is a very big FTSE company, one of the sort of top 10 in the FTSE. And we always describe it as we run the motorways and the A roads of transporting energy. So from where it's generated to where it's consumed, gas or power. And that's in the UK and the US. So our business is pretty much half and half UK, US. We're going through an enormous growth phase, as many people will understand, because of things like decarbonisation, moving to more green energy, reconfiguring the grid to take on more renewables, which means that it all has to be reshaped because the renewables do things like come from the sea or from solar farms, as opposed to coal-fired generators or coal mines, and also because of the growth of data centres. And so there's huge amount of demand for electrification in all of our territories, and it's a very interesting time. So that was a very long answer to a short question, but hopefully it gave you a sense of why I'm here and why I'm interested in technology as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so I'm curious how you balance transformation, so adopting new technologies, evolving processes, with the kind of regulatory responsibility that comes with your sector. So how do you avoid moving too slowly or too quickly?
Yeah, well, this is a perennial, I think, for many people, because in a business like ours, maybe more so than many others, we move at a pace which is appropriate to our regulatory deals. And we also move at a pace which is politically acceptable, for want of a better word. So we can only go as fast as we are funded to do so, and we can only, our customers ultimately pay for the investments that we make through their energy bills. And so to some extent we are, those costs are socialized across everybody, from a granny in a flat in the north of England to a multimillionaire somewhere. And so we've got to be very mindful of maintaining our focus on affordability and the fact that we are building very long-lasting infrastructure, maintaining an essential network, but it has to be at a reasonable cost, because at some point, some people just can't afford to pay. So we've got to balance all of that. And that means that we've got people in the business and in the legal function who have been here for many, many years and who understand all of the regulatory obligations that we're obliged to adhere to. And they also try to balance all of that with being innovative and trying to seek the most efficient way to do things. And we have to kind of adapt to all sides of that, I think. There's no excuse for us to just stay within the status quo and be complacent about what we do. We've got to be as efficient as we possibly can and be innovative in order to, deliver what's needed in a new world and also do it effectively. But we do also have to bear in mind that there's a lot of history in this sector. There's a lot of inbuilt industry knowledge. There's a lot of things we need to be careful of. And we have to, well, when it comes down to it, our most important job is keeping the lights on. So there's sort of always a balance.
Yeah. So it sounds strategic, but it's also behavioural, and historical. So what does it actually take to make new ways of working stick inside a kind of large global legal function, and not just announce them, really embed them? How do you reinforce accountability, and what role does the executive sponsorship play, and how do you align different regions? So just small questions like that.
It's a great set of questions, and I don't know that I have all the answers. So just to caveat this for anybody who's interested, in fact, I know I don't have all the answers. I think the first thing is getting an understanding of what problem you're trying to fix. So what we did was we did a really deep analysis of all of the work that our teams are doing, and actually let's focus this on just the legal team. I have a few other teams in my area, but just with the legal team in particular. The first thing we looked at was kind of how do we get demand management more systemized? So what are we being asked to do? Where does it fit within the priority list? Where, how do you calibrate the asks based on a matrix of risk, reward, opportunity, all of those things? And because we're all, I suspect, very familiar with the old way things were done, which was your friends in the business would call you up and ask you for a bit of advice. And if those people in the business were savvy, they will have built up some good relationships with the legal function. They'll know who to call. They'll get answers quickly. Sort of those who shout loudest get the quickest answers. And that's just not a good way to deliver legal services in a proper, structured, scalable, efficient way that gives you insights and data upon which to build your function and demonstrate effectiveness. Because otherwise your CEO is simply saying to you, are you running an efficient function? And you go, yep. And how do they know? Like nobody really can know. So, and benchmarking doesn't do much to help you really, although it's a helpful little bit of a guide as long as it's treated with the right level of respect and the right level of cynicism. So we do use a little bit of benchmarking just to give us a sense of where we might have opportunities. So I think what we did was a really good piece of work to understand what was the demand management, where were people spending time on what we call low value or low complexity work, which we probably could sort of try to find different ways to deliver. Which bits of work could we just stop, and which bit could we automate or make simpler to access by the business in a more automated or self-help way? We're creating a sort of a universal front door so that people can access, the services of the legal team through one route. They don't need to know which part of the legal team they want to go to. They need to just go through the door and the system directs them. And that sort of process has been in place for a long time. I've had it in place in other organizations I've worked in, but with the advances in technology now, there's far more opportunity to do that in a far more dynamic, agile way. So I suspect we'll come on to that. Then the other piece of it is, my lights are all going off, aren't they? I'm going to have to turn them on in a moment. Forgive me. The other piece is then thinking about the resourcing. So where do you need people? Yes. Where do you need external people? How can you use ALSPs? How can you use law firms more effectively? What's your resourcing strategy for getting the best value out of your law firms? And how can you get them to engage with you on the journey of change that you're on? But the one big thing is getting people to buy into the what's in it for them. Why is it going to make their life better? And why should they not be scared that it's going to mean the end of their jobs? What it's going to mean is a change to their jobs, but that's going to come anyway. And frankly, they can either get with the program and understand how to embrace it, or they can resist it and they will then get left behind. And I think it's a difficult message to deliver, but it is quite fundamental.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're having a lot of similar conversations right now. And just specifically on the outside counsel strategy, so how do you define value in your outside counsel relationships today? Is it cost? Is it outcomes, collaboration? Is it something else?
Yeah, it's so hard, isn't it? I mean, cost is, it's an important part of it, let's face it, particularly in today's world, because we've seen the law firm costs go through the roof.
Yes, and continuing to do so.
Yeah, and it does slightly, it's a bit mind-boggling, to be honest. But I think it's all about right sizing, for want of a better word. That it's the right firm and the right advisor for the right purpose. And I think that there is a huge amount to be said for the relationship side. So I never underestimate the fact that when you've got good established relationships, you can just call them up, and there is this not even stated but sort of free advice. You know, if you've got a really good relationship, you should be able to just call and go, look, I've got a problem. You need to help me. I just want to bounce a few ideas around. For the big projects, clearly, we do go to some of our big firms. We have a very established, very, very strong panel. We've put that in place for a number of years. We tend not to deviate from it. It's very important because we brought all of our panel firms together when we launched the panel. We brought them all in one place and said to them, you are part of our bigger ecosystem. We will ask you to work together. We'll also ask you to compete against one another. We will do use things like PERSUIT and go, we want 3 of you to bid for a deal. Thank you very much. And it works well. So there's an element of friendly competition, and there's an element of distance that you have to maintain that tension. But I think the biggest thing that we're really investing in is helping them to understand our business, our culture, what we need, because no two clients are the same. And them saying, well, we're experts in such and such an area of law, even in a business sector, is not enough. The third layer that they really need to understand is, what's our risk appetite? That's very company specific. What's our risk appetite, and how can they therefore advise in context and cut out the noise, cut out the kind of superfluous advice that is technically right but is irrelevant, and get to the nub of the real issue. And that's a little bit of to and fro, I think, between us. And I also recognise that I think we as in-house lawyers need to do a better job of bringing our firms closer, because it's very hard for them. Having been on the outside, it's hard. You know, you're trying to desperately sort of second guess what you think might be good advice. And unless you know the context, it's very hard.
Yeah. I mean, that leads to true partnership. You know, that's almost part of your internal ecosystem.
That's exactly right. And I think the other thing, just on that, going back to the fees as well, I mean, the ability to have the honest conversation and say, look, I'm sorry, but we don't need 4 partners in the room for this discussion. And by the way, we're not paying for it. We just can't be complacent about that stuff. So yeah, and that requires a little bit of chemistry and trust. So it does become a bit of a personal thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then obviously the hottest topic, AI, is changing that dynamic as well. And I'm not sure what sort of conversations you're having with your firms around AI and how they're using it. But it's clearly transforming legal departments, and obviously in a regulated industry, the stakes are different as well.
Yeah, it is transforming. I mean, I think what I've found is the smaller firms, or when I say smaller, the sort of mid-tier firms that we use, and we have a mix, like pretty much everybody does. They are very keen in getting involved in it. And actually, we did a thing recently where we did a hackathon, and we invited some of our firms to come in and spend a day with people in our team to go through some areas of opportunity and what might they propose to address those opportunities, and how can we work together. And the winning team was a combination of 2 of our external firms with a couple of our internal colleagues working together on a particular solution to create a sort of a quasi front door type thing, but with more a particular bespoke focus. And it was just and they were so keen to get involved. They were absolutely massively supportive of investing the time in the relationship building and in the solution finding. So that was fantastic. I think some of the firms are maybe a bit more nervous about it, but it's going to happen. It is happening already. So they're better off to get on the train, as I said before.
Where do you see that value being truly delivered inside legal, and where do you think we're still in experimentation mode, and also where do you think caution is still warranted?
Yeah, it's I mean, I don't know. It's very hard to know on some of those things, but we're experimenting in quite a lot of areas in a small way and piloting things that are sort of safer in order to try to test the boundaries of what is safe and what isn't safe. As I said, we did our sort of analysis of where do we think the opportunities are, and we're looking at those and then in different buckets. So there's a sort of a bucket around business enablement, which is things like creating the front doors, defining different workflows, looking at areas like, say, for example, our procurement team. We do a lot of big, heavy procurement, and a lot of that is heavily regulated because the utilities are subject to procurement legislation, which is a little bit similar to what used to be still is EU procurement legislation. And so there are quite significant constraints about how we demonstrate compliance with that. But actually, automation gives us, that's hugely beneficial if we get it right, because it's standardized, systemized, standardized. The processes are then documented and maintained, and all of the data is maintained. It's incredibly helpful if you were to ever be investigated. You've got a whole suite of evidence to prove that you were compliant. So I think there's real opportunities on upside for all of that, as well as it being simpler, faster, easier, and more cost effective. The other sort of areas are more complex in that they're more less standardized and more for within the legal team itself. So we use multiple different things, but for example, we use Harvey as one of our main AI tools, and where people are uploading documents, looking for advice, crunching through lots of bits of advice and moving through it. We describe it as sort of having a quite new trainee in your office. So you use the system as effectively a junior person, and you allow it to do a first draft or to synthesize a number of documents together, do a DD or whatever you're doing, and then you have to check it. So the big guardrail we have made absolutely clear to all of our teams is, it's called an assistant for a reason. It is there to help. It is not there to provide the answers. And if you don't check it, that's on you. You can't blame the system. So I think that's something we're really cognizant of. I suspect these tools will get better and better, but you do have to check it.
Absolutely. And so just an extension of that, what capability do you think will distinguish leading legal departments over the next few years?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think what I've described a little bit about the kind of the standardized, getting better workflows, demand management, delivering things in a faster, more slick, all of that will be a given. And in fact, I slightly worry about the speed thing, because I think we're playing into a dynamic which has the risk of devaluing what we do a little bit if we're not careful. Because if we just demonstrate that we can do it all faster, there is a slight risk that people will go, well, can't be that hard. It's really just a kind of a numbers game then.
Yeah.
And of course, we all know that as in-house teams, our real reason for being here is not about delivering things faster or more. It's about managing risk appropriately. Absolutely. And therefore, I think what will distinguish people going forward will be the ability to use technology to make horizon scanning, to make insight from data much more effective than it ever has been, so that we can actually synthesize information together and then use that to leverage what might happen in the future, and to not leverage, but to understand what might happen in the future, and to therefore we sometimes describe ourselves as we have sort of tentacles in every part of the business. But if we use technology, those tentacles can spread far more effectively into the areas of risks that we perceive. And therefore, we can really see where those risks might start to become a real problem and get ahead of them. Yeah. So I think that value add, anticipation of problems, and also that would be for National Grid. That's a huge priority. I think for businesses where they're perhaps in a different market and there's more competition, so FMCG type businesses, there's a huge value in speed to market and contracting. That's important for us too, but I think it's slightly different. Whereas if I were put myself back in, say, my Vodafone shoes or O2 shoes, getting your stuff done, getting it faster, getting your contracting done more quickly and more slickly, incredibly valuable. Lawyers spend a lot of time negotiating contracts and deals, and quite often they're never ever looked at again. And if we could spend less time negotiating the deals and fussing about clauses and things like that, and more time getting the things signed, because actually the reality is we're never going to use that. And we knew that from the data that we had from all the hundreds of ones we've done before. We would be able to say to our team, items 1, 4, and 7 are important. Everything else, let it go. Get to market fast. Yeah. I think the commercial agility would be incredibly helpful.
So we're shifting gears. You've clearly navigated a lot of evolution, regulatory, operational, technological. What advice would you give to lawyers who aspire to leading complex global organisations?
Oh, gosh. I would say, probably a couple of things which I think are perennial. Agility is really important. So just be prepared for the unknown. I think as lawyers, we are trained, we're probably naturally self-selecting, slightly cautious, risk-averse perhaps. But I think more than anything else, we're trained to think about the future by looking back. And we're trained to really respect knowledge, and therefore to think that the knowledge must all sit within us. And it's sort of a finite game. And the really brilliant lawyers who are out there or business leaders, lawyers, are people who go, well, there's no answer to this question. This is a question of judgment. And it's a question of weighing up all of the multitude of issues that I face and finding and optimizing the next step. It's not about perfection. It's about optimization. And the optimization also goes back to timing. There's no point in having a perfect answer if it's too late, because the ship has sailed. So there's all of these things you have to think about, I think, are very important. So the ability to think about context and be agile is incredibly important. The other thing I think personally has really helped me a huge amount is just relationships. Just building relationships. I mean, the old way of calling it was networking. People tend to recoil from the word networking. I don't, but it sounds terribly forced and a bit, slightly 1980, a bit weird and maybe a bit slimy. The reality is networking is, to my mind, is simply about building a cohort of people that you trust, that help you, that you will help, that just share sometimes concerns, risks, issues, advice. And lawyers are really good at it. I have never, ever reached out to somebody who I didn't even know, but I just kind of maybe came across and I said, I think you could be really experienced on this. Would you mind spending 10 minutes with me on this? They're so generous and it's incredibly helpful. And I think the same goes for the importance of building relationships in the company that you're in, around the executive table or whatever table you're at or whatever business you're advising. If you don't understand what the person that you're advising is trying to get out of what they're looking for you to solve, you can't advise them properly. You need to put yourself in their shoes and go, what do they need? What do they want? What are they worried about? How can I help? And that requires a little bit of knowing them as well. So I think build relationships would be my 2 things.
That's great advice. And what's something that you've learned as a leader that you'd wish you'd known earlier?
Oh, well, first of all, the relationship one, that was one that I I think I overestimated the importance of the technical and underestimated the importance of the relationship. But probably the other thing, and it's a similar thing, which is understand what your role is as opposed to everyone else's role. Because there is a danger, and again, I think it's our training doesn't help us, in thinking that the more senior you get, the more you have to know about everything. And you just can't. I don't know, 300 people on my team or something like that. And they are all, in their own individual way, really brilliant at what they do. And there's no way I could know what they know. And nor is that my job. So learning that and learning to have the confidence to recruit brilliant people that are way more brilliant than you, and put them around you and make them shine and just be challenging and supportive and build a team dynamic. It is the most important thing. It's just incredibly, you'll never succeed without a good team that has the space to shine.
People hear me say that all day long, so I absolutely agree with Ash.
And we're aligned, I'm glad.
Yep, 100%. And finally, so as you look ahead to 26 and beyond, what feels most urgent for legal leaders right now?
Well, we live in a world at the moment, maybe everybody would say this, but it does feel slightly scarily volatile. And therefore, I think none of us, the pace of changes is just moving faster and faster and faster. The opportunities are also brilliant, but the challenges are pretty big. And so I think that kind of need to step right back and go, where do we fit into this? Where does our strategy fit into all of this? How can we continue to be agile? How can we learn to think about the bigger picture in the way we provide our services? Incredibly important. But actually the technology, this need to embrace technological advancement in order to help us as I said before, to identify patterns and data and insight and be able to kind of think about where we should be putting our efforts, where we need to identify risks and things like that, and root causes of things. I think it's so important. So there's just something in for the next year. I think 2026 is the year that AI and technological developments are going to just fly, because it's been coming now for a couple of years, or probably a bit more, but everybody seems to be on that train now. So I think it's just get on it and just see what happens. And it won't all be perfect, but let's just be a bit brave and embrace the opportunities ahead.
Completely agree. Justine, this has been such a thoughtful conversation. It's clear that legal leadership today isn't just about managing risk. It's about stewarding transformation responsibly and being really intentional. And I thank you for sharing your perspective with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.